victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Petticini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle, Sharks coming through, none of them can hold this!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. It is the rare off-stream one now for our 60s as we record our round 11 and round 4, by the way, preview podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, and joining me, as I just alluded to, is my good mate, 60s. Big fella, it's been raining sideways as I just look out my window here. It has been pouring here in the inner west. I don't know about your way out in the hills, but the weather is not kind ahead of a big weekend of football where the Eels have pretty much a must-win encounter against the Newcastle Knights on the Friday pub slot.
You can switch that on.
Oh, yes, there we go. Got the audio on there, making sure that everything's there. So, yeah, I just had a nice little preamble there, 60s, talking about the weather and the must-win game against the Newcastle Knights on Friday night, as well as the round 4 catch-up game of the Jersey Flegg, mate. So, a lot happening this weekend. We thought we only had 2 games on the docket initially, but we got a team list later in the week confirming that the Jersey Flegg indeed are playing their catch-up game against the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles out at 4 Pines Park Friday, 6 o'clock, same time slot as the NRL. That is brutal. It is brutal because not only does it mean that, we're not able to watch that live either in person or on stream, that also means where we'd like to cover it as well, we're not able to do so. No.
So, yes, you're right. It is brutal.
Precipitate a very ordinary instant reaction podcast if we weren't paying attention to the NRL.
Yeah, just slightly, mate. So it is disappointing, and of course it means that there's probably going to be very few Eels supporters out there at Brookvale.
No, none.
Being able to get behind them. Yeah. It's so. We're sort of used to this with the scheduling that often happens.
not the Friday pub slot though. It's usually the Saturday afternoon or the Sunday afternoon game. Yeah. The pub slot game is the one that you never get the clash with. 6 o'clock on a Friday, but yeah, that make-up game. I guess are Manly playing the next game on the NRL docket? Is that why? No, it's the Bulldogs and Roosters. Wow, Manly are playing on Saturday in the 5:30 slot. That is a bizarre choice then. There, I can't fathom why this is in a clashing spot with the NRL 60s. And even from the club's perspective, now the logistics get stretched that much more thin because they're going to be sending so many resources up the highway to Newcastle. Not to say the Flegg won't be able to survive, but it just makes it that much more annoying for the club.
As I said, mate, we've been used to it with the venue choices and the scheduling this year, and it's been something that the Flegg have seemed to have been subjected to over a number of years, but especially this year, it's
gone over the top.
Yeah. But before we go on, mate, again, a shout out to our sponsor, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and of course the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club. Allow us to do what we do. Basically, without that support, it wouldn't be possible. So, and also a reminder that if you would like to support the Cumberland Throw, we have the Patreon option for you. Just click the link that's there on the homepage and also on any posts. So we appreciate the support that people have been giving there. And yes, also appreciate the people that come and talk to us and say, look, can we support you any higher on the Patreon? We're working on some levels and the sort of access that we want to provide for people who
we'd rather leave it at tier 1 right now and then not half-ass, the higher tiers.
That's it. Yeah. So as people know, it's it's always been about how much access can we provide for you, what sort of coverage can we provide to be all things Parramatta Eels. But also, John, speaking of all things Parramatta Eels, we can't forget that tonight we've got 3 Eels players in action in the state of origin. So we've got Abby Church and, of course, Kennedy Charrington for the Blues. And then we've also got Rory Owen in action for the Queensland Cane Toads. And we wish all of them best. We're New South Wales supporters, but we wish all the players an injury-free, successful game.
Yeah.
And it's always great to see that Eels players are being recognised for their efforts in the blue and gold. And with those 3 players, it's obvious that they've deserved the call up to representative football.
Yeah. Wow.
And so we'll be watching with great interest tonight, and also with those fingers crossed for them that.
Yeah,
that
we broke down the huge games that Abby and Kennedy had for the Blues in the wake of that first game victory. And on debut, Rory Owen had a couple of rookie moments there in terms of being a rep rookie 60s, but showed plenty of reasons to suggest why she should be sticking around for game 2, hence why she was picked.
And a try on debut.
Yeah, a great try on debut. And then the other little thing, which is tangential to Origin, but you had that great chat with Bill Richards out at the BGA Golf Day, and he revealed that Kennedy's on board as the NRLW representative for the Blue and Gold Alliance. So starting to incorporate the old girls now as much as the old boys, which is a really cool step for the BGA and the former players or legacy players of the Blue and Gold.
Yes, and we have had female members of the BGA as being officials,
correct,
from the past, but now we're going to be in that situation where there will be female players will be part of we can't call it old boys anymore in that regard.
Old boys and old girls, isn't it? It's just it's got a good fit there.
Former players,
the former players and officials is a nice, not even politically correct, just a neutral way of putting it. And we look forward to being able to share some of that content with you guys in the coming future. We worked alongside the BGA for that golf day. It was an incredible day, 60s, and some really great things happened out there. And like I said, look forward to being able to get some of that content out soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, as you said, we've got 3 grades to get through here. So let's kick it off with the Jersey Flegg match, that catch-up match from, I think it was round 4. Earlier this season. Luckily, there's the global bye this week, so it gives them that week to be able to play the game. There was a late team list that was put up. It is available on the Eels website if people actually want to go and see that.
Not on the front page. It's not on New South
Wales.
Yeah, go to
not
the
on
news
New
page.
South Wales Rugby League at this stage. So, I'll let you run through it because we've got some players returning from injury. We've got players that have come back from New South Wales Cup. And we're also seeing more faces from the SG Ball squad from this year.
Yes, that's a nice little summary there of the squad composition 60s. And as you mentioned, it's a 6 o'clock kickoff on Friday night out at Four Plains Park, which is, of course, more traditionally known as Brookvale Oval 60s. And the Eels come into this one on the back of their worst performance of the season. Got thoroughly thumped by the Dogs by way of Mitchell Woods, who had a great game against them. And let me just check their ladder position now. Yeah, they drop out of the top 4 as a result in 5th place, so still within touching distance at the top of the ladder. But they do want to get this win under their belt. And Manly are struggling right now, 60s. 3 wins, 6 losses, down in 12 of 14 teams on the ladder. And for the Eels, like you mentioned, a bit of a balance of faces here from established names and SG Ball talent. Starting at fullback, we have the return of a key player from a short layoff with that, I think it was a hand or arm injury, 60s. But Arpa Twiddle reclaiming his preferred number 1 jersey. So he's going to be a key part of that spine. On the wings, you got Maui Alamadine and Dakota Kakoi. In the centres, Tavaka Palu, who's been a powerhouse there for the Eels down that left edge. He's got a new face opposite him, though, Will Shears, who I believe is another Queensland recruit, a St. Paddy's Queensland boy by way of Mackay, if my cursory research proves to be correct. So it'd be interesting to see how he goes once we get a chance to review the footage, because, of course, that clash makes it kind of difficult to get a first impression live. But moving on to the halves now, and Matty Hunter comes back to this grade after spending a week up in the New South Wales Cup. He'll partner Josh Lynn in the front row. Got Tyrese Lakini and Saxon Pryke. So 2 core players, they're 60s, but not usually front rowers in the conventional sense, although they have done some spot fill work there. At dummy half, it was initially named as Josh Hudson on Wednesday. Jack Hudson, not Josh Hudson. Getting Josh Hodgson and Jack confused there. But the updated team was now as Patrick Spence there. So Paddy Spence getting bumped up from the interchange into the starting dummy half role. And then on the edges, you got Dom Lestratus and Will Lewis, I believe right and left respectively, if for previous games are anything to be indicative of. And then at lock forward, Dom's twin brother Raf getting a chance to start this week. On the interchange, it's an all SG Ball rotation. Lorenzo Talatona coming into that team because of that change at dummy half with Patrick Spence getting the starting gig there. And he's joined on the rotation by Josiah Funa Ayuta, Tom Summer, Elijah Shane Tapa'u, and then Kobe Herford, who we haven't seen for a bit because I guess he must have been injured, is the 18th man in his 60s, and that's a rugged back rower, middle forward there that they can also deploy. Eels looking pretty good here. Last week they were a bit ravaged by injuries, much like the New South Wales Cup. Still missing some key players. No Tiankan Brown, no Damascus Nemia. We know that Big T's injured. I'm not sure about Damascus, if he's injured or in the mix for a call-up in the New South Wales Cup. It's always safer to assume injury rather than getting your hopes dashed by a lack of a call-up to senior football. But, yeah, still missing some players for sure there, mate. And how do you see them holding up ahead of the Manly game?
Yeah, look, it's after last week, it's hard to maybe draw a line on what the form might be coming into this, because the Eels had been in a really rich vein of form, but last week, as you said, it was easily their worst performance of the season, but also a lot of disruption. So when we look at this, Arpa Twiddle coming back in is obviously a massive in, as is the return of Matthew Hunter, the captain of the team and 5'8". We've got Paddy Spence in at dummy half, and Paddy's he's been part of the squad for, I think this is probably his third year now that he's been part of that squad. And so he's going to do a reliable job out of dummy half. I think there's, they'll miss what Hudson has brought to dummy half this season, but they're not going to be let down in any way by Paddy. And I also like the fact that we've got Will Lewis has been, I think, finding that form on the edge since he's returned to the team. So that's a positive. And outside of that, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Josiah Funa Ayuta will produce in the Flegg. Now, he was part of the NRL pre-season.
Not a debut in the Flegg for Josiah either. He spent some time there last year, no?
Yeah. So, and he's, as I said, he was involved in the NRL pre-season up till Christmas. Didn't look out of place there, either physically or skill-wise. So it was a very good pre-season for him. We know there were games through this SG Ball season where he was just the dominant figure out on the field. So that'll be interesting. But so too the inclusion of Tom Summer as well. He was really a consistent factor in that team.
Rugged post-contact tackle breaking middle forward, just a reliable presence off the interchange for Mitchell Lewis throughout that season.
Yes. So look, the spine looks strong. With all the familiar faces that are there. Yes, we're missing the two really big middle forwards in Big T and also Damascus.
Yep.
That has to impact you. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing to be sneezed about with Tyrese and Saxon being the starting front rowers as well. So,
that's a fair statement. Tyrese showing some real positional versatility. He's played edge, he's played lock, he's played prop, and done it all quite well. And we know that Saxon's a high work rate, industrious middle, has been for a number of years. So him being able to transition from lock to prop is not a shock by any means. But looking at that interchange 60s, we know Josiah is a big, powerful back rower. Tom Summer, we spoke about being that, sort of more compact but powerful middle forward. Elijah Shane Tapahu, built as a big middle forward as well. Lorenzo Talatana is a 5'8" specialist, playing 14 this week. What do we expect out of Lorenzo? He started last week in the deputy work for Matty Hunter. Gets bumped back to the bench this week. Is he going to play in the halves? Will he play a dummy half? Is this a chance for him to showcase positional versatility, or is there a plan to shuffle guys around?
Yeah, I really don't know. I think we're going to see more, how that unfolds come Friday night. But John, I'm thinking back, I can't remember seeing him slotting in anywhere other than being a starting
6
halves player.
Or 7. Yeah, exactly.
So so if he was to move to onto the field, you know what? Now that I think about it, I have seen Josh Lynn jump into dummy half when he was doing the NRL preseason. So
there you go. That's a good bit of our memory recollection there.
Yeah. So perhaps when Lorenzo comes on, rather than substituting for Paddy Spence, it might be that he goes into the that he goes to the halves, and maybe Josh Lynn goes to dummy half. That's a possibility. I don't know that that's what's actually going to happen, because that's so long ago, and Josh hasn't been expected to play that sort of role. And really during the preseason, that was jumping in because when you had those opposed sessions going, you
need a body in there, yeah.
You need a body in there, yeah. So
and the thing is, Lorenzo, outstanding halves prospect, and part of that reason we're having that whole discussion about whether the club should look at Galvin or go internal. But he does have the build to play dummy half and be a real wrecking ball there. He is a pound for pound menace. Like, he is very strong. So yeah. I'm not saying force him to convert the dummy half, but as far as an interesting little stopgap solution, Lorenzo has the frame to be damaging with that running game. So definitely something to consider there. But Eels, 36-10 losers last start 60s, well off their best. Head out to 4 Pines Park now, taking on the Seagulls, who are struggling. What is the forecast for this game? We're expecting the Eels to bounce back. I'm looking out the window. If I take a look at Sydney weather tomorrow, I'll go Manly weather. It's not going to be great based on what we're seeing. Yeah, it's in the evening. It's going to be cool. Yeah, it says rainy on the main forecast, but the actual precipitation chances sort of from earlier in the day, maybe it's going to be about 45% chance of rain. So there's a chance it's going to be wet and it's going to be cool. Bearing that in mind, what do we expect out of our Eels against the Seagulls?
John, I'd like to see their game simplified this week. We don't want to get into errors. And look, I know that they can play some expansive football, but I think when you're trying to bounce back from the sort of loss that they had last week, and as I said, albeit with a lot of disruptions and players that are missing, you still want to see, those basics, isn't it? Like, we spoke about this all through junior reps, that if you've got the high completions, and it's pretty much true anyway than in NRL, but when you're looking at the lower grades, you really want to see those completion rates being nice and high. Like to see the forwards get that, just lay that platform. Let's not go lateral too much. And if you do, you want to be working off a platform rather than sending that ball wide early. So, look, I'm not sure what's happened with Avery.
Yeah, that's a good shout, because was he? No, he wasn't named originally. I'm thinking back to the LU team list that was out there, and he was not named. So I didn't get a chance to review the game last week, 60s. I'm not sure if he. I saw the quote unquote highlights of the Eels, but I didn't watch the full game, so I'm not sure if there was an incident for him in terms of injury. But he is a big out. Has been
Yeah.
in sensational touch for the Eels. I mean, a great pickup from Melbourne. Jason Ryles, I assume, maybe had a hand in that one, being in the Melbourne system and having a chance to have a look at him because he's been really good at both wing and fullback. But he is out. And Eels still got a fair backline. Alamadine, Palu, and Kukoi have been pretty regular fixtures, or at least Alamadine and Palu are. Kukoi's come into the team more recently and done all right. And we got a new look player in Will Shears there. So it's not like they're still bereft of talent, but they're certainly not as strong in terms of what we know from that earlier backline that featured the likes of Will Penasini and Bradley Avery alongside some other guys. So, yeah, chance of these new faces.
Richie Penasini.
Did I say Will?
I think you did.
I thought I said Richard, but I meant Richard. But yes, Richard Penasini, who's now moved up, understandably, to New South Wales Cup. But yeah, really keen to see how the SG Ball boys handle this one, mate. Funa Ayuda is a guy that the club no doubt has tagged as a NRL player and an NRL plus player sooner rather than later, hence that NRL preseason. But Lorenzo, super talented young half, really keen to see what sort of tracks he can make here in the Jersey Flegg. I know that there's that overlying story with Lachlan Galvin there too, but that's you deal with that when it comes to. And Lorenzo is an Eel for the time being, and I hope he can kill it as an Eel. But yeah, Tom Summer, Elijah Shane Tapa'u, a lot of young boys there. And still plenty of experience. Lynn, Hunter, Arpa Twiddle's back. We mentioned Moe Alamadine. Who else we got there? Tyrese and Patrick Spence and Saxon Pryke. They're all seasoned flag players now. So team's not short in experience. They just got to, like you said, get the fundamentals under the belt, complete their sets, kick to the corners. I know it sounds so trite saying it that way, but it really is that simple. The team that completes at 80% in these grades invariably is going to win far more often than they don't. And this team has the talent to capitalise on opportunistic football, which means all they need to do there is to put themselves in a position for the opportunities to arise by completing their sets, kicking to the corners, making their tackles.
Yeah, it is as you said. It sounds like there's not much to the game when you put it that way, but it's just so true. And the thing is, I think especially coming off a loss and a big loss, you just want to get the completions up and build that confidence, so that it's into the game, and then start to play a bit more expansive football once you, as you said, put yourself into position where you've got a better chance of converting opportunities into tries. So, okay, that takes us from the Jersey Flegg. We're both tipping Eels wins, of course. Now it takes us to New South Wales Cup.
Yeah, this is the game where if you've got the Friday Arvo off and you're either able to get to Newcastle, able to watch it on stream, a chance to catch Reggie's and have a half long weekend. Not quite the full long weekend, but maybe you'll have a full long weekend if you're watching this game, I guess. But the Eels taking on the Knights in Reggie's. 3:30 p.m. kickoff out at McDonald Jones Stadium. Going for the Eels team who get plenty of faces back in this week, and they needed it. They fell to Canterbury last week, 60s. They were right there with the Bulldogs, but some rough goal kicking for Dean Hawkins and a window before halftime really cost them. But alongside that too was the amount of rotation that was enforced upon them that week. So coming back into this team at fullback, massive inclusion. Joash Papali, who I've billed as maybe the form player of the tournament, and I stand by that. He's been on fire this year. Jake Tungall will work the left sideline with Samuel Luizu on the right. And then you've got Araz Namva and Richard Penasini, a pair of young centres there who are doing quite well on the grade. And then in the halves, coming back into the team like Joash is Ronald Volkman. He'll partner Dean Hawkins in the 7. Front row sees another returnee, just never ends. This one from suspension with Ruben McGregor back into the front row. He replaces Toni Mataele with the big young bookend getting the call to the NRL this week. You've got Brendan Hands and Ryan Madison working alongside him in the front row. Charlie Guyman comes back to this grade and he'll play on the left edge. We speculated on Team West Tuesday. I'm not sure about this 160s. That could be subject to change in terms of what side he plays, but Bryce has played right in the Reggies, and that's where he's been named. Alongside there, Captain Dan Keir, who comes back from a quadriceps injury. Good timing there from Dan. And then we go to the interchange where Joey Lussick, another returnee, comes back from that broken thumb. He had surgery on that earlier in the year and has made a 1 week ahead of recovery or ahead of his scheduled return. He's joined by Kang Kalachi, Brock Parker, and as I said on Team West Tuesday, the luckless Will Latu has been great in the last fortnight, but by virtue of Chowie Goma and Dan Keir coming back into the team, there's no place for him in the starting back row, and he goes back to the interchange. So a lot happening this week, 60s. There are a lot of faces coming back into this team. No doubt it's all for the good here. A ton of experience, a ton of talent coming back into the roster. Taking on a Newcastle team, if I quickly check the New South Wales Cup ladder, the Eels have been top 4 for most of the year, and they enter this round in third. Taking on a Newcastle team that, like the Manly Seagulls in the Jersey Flegg, come in at third last. They're 11-13 rather than 12 or 14 in the Flegg. 2 wins, 7 losses, and a bye to their name. They've got a surprisingly decent for and against given their ladder position relative to their peers on the ladder. They're minus 47 and everyone else is in triple digits around them. So they're maybe better than their record suggests, 60s, or at least they've got a couple of big wins maybe. But I look at that Newcastle team and there are some names and talents that we are very familiar with. Obviously, former Eels in Matty Arthur Bud's there, number 9. You got Jacob Davis on the interchange, another dummy half, who spent a couple of years here for the Eels and did all right. But you'd be familiar with guys like Cody Hopwood and Jermaine McEwen, 60s, who are blue-chip representative players we've seen in the New South Wales 19s in recent seasons. Very talented forwards there. And I think Jermaine actually made his NRL debut this year. So plenty talented, this Newcastle team, in terms of the young faces. Connor Vitano, Logan Aoki, these are players we've seen in the past. And Tyson Gamble and Jackson Hastings is among the more NRL experienced halves pairings you're going to find in this grade. Probably one of the few halves pairings that would have more NRL experience than Hawkins and Volkman in this grade. So maybe we'll get Newcastle at a bad time because there is some talent there, but it's going to be a good fight and a chance for the Eels to bounce back from that, 13-point loss, wasn't it, against the Dogs at the end. They kicked a disrespectful field goal and scored the late try. But where do you sort of put a gauge in the Eels 60s? Bad loss last start. Not as bad as the Flegg, but it's still a bad loss. But so many changes, so many reinforcements on the road, though, at an awkward time. You don't play 3:30 on Fridays very often. So how much is this plays against the Eels? What's there for the Eels to exploit against the Novocastrians? And why are Parramatta going to win this one?
John, there were moments last week. No, actually, let's just say straight off the bat that New South Wales Cup game between the Dogs and the Eels last week, defence was not a priority for either team. It was, I think it ended up something like 7 tries to 6 to the Bulldogs. They had a lot more success with the goal kicking, hence that 13-point margin rather than, say, a 6-7 point margin. But, yeah, when the tries came, they came in a run. So we saw the Bulldogs, let's talk about the Eels. The Eels concede 4 tries in 10 minutes before halftime. And they went from 14-0 up to 24-14 down. And that really was the match there in that period. And the defence there during that time, I don't know if there's any other word other than abysmal. But what we also have to realise is that with that team last week, the number of disruptions were high.
Very.
It wasn't just players who were out through injury or elevation or suspension. The Eels also rested a couple of players as well. The most notable being Joash Papali. And reason being that they had they were travelling to Tamworth for a start. The Eels were also sessioned for a biggish training session on Monday for the NRL because of the Friday schedule for the match. They're not going to back up playing into a training session on the Monday, on Monday morning, if they're not leaving Tamworth till later in the evening. So you've got the drive back from Tamworth, which is significant. And I guess they're not getting back until approaching midnight on Sunday night. So, yeah, a few players didn't play. And that disruption level was just so high. And it ended up really being a collection of players who have been playing Ron Massey Cup, players who have been playing Jersey Flegg. It was just, it was a tough game to expect any cohesion, but attitude probably wasn't there as well, because that's measured by the defence.
Yep.
And
Agreed.
there were just too many moments where individuals let themselves down in that respect. So, John, what am I looking for this weekend? As you say, that's a Newcastle team where you look at it on paper and you go, why are they sitting where they are on the table?
It's all close losses. I'm looking at their record. They've got bigger losses against the Magpies and the Jets, but beyond that, it's a lot of single-digit losses. 2 points against the Rabbitohs, 2 points they beat the Rabbitohs, 2 points they lost to the Bears, 2 points they lost to the Bulldogs, 14 points against the Panthers, 12 against the Warriors, 1 point against the Jets, which is a very tough matchup. We know about that one. And then 26 against the Magpies, way back in round 1. So they might be better than their ladder position indicates, 60s.
Yeah, and you look at it and you go, that's a pretty strong spine that they've got, especially for this level of football. And so much starts and ends with the spine. Now, I guess that's where the Eels can't undersell themselves either, because you've got, as you said, probably one of the stars of the season this year in New South Wales Cup in Joash Papali at fullback. You've got Volkman and Hawkins in the halves. And then, of course, you've got Brendan Hands, who's now an experienced NRL level dummy half, and interchanging with Joey Lussick there. And that was a first grade interchanging.
Not so long ago, yeah.
Dummy half pair not so long ago. So, yeah, interesting matchup in that regard, because got a lot of time for Bud's Arthur, obviously. And, those halves of Newcastle, as you said, they're about the most experience that you would see at this level. So, John, I think it's going to be much closer than what the table positions indicate.
Yep, I agree. I look at their record, I look at that team, and I say you can't be treading too carelessly in this one, because the Knights, they got the talent, and the record says that they're not as bad as the amount of losses they've had really indicates. And
now
home field, odd time slot, Eels coming off that weird away game at Tamworth, which is the regional round. There is a lot here against the Eels, and they've got the reinforcements, but I don't know. This is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, and look, I think there's a couple of unlucky players that are starting from the interchange this week in Kalashi and Latu. And look, Kalashi has played a lot of this season in the New South Wales Cup, but he would be Ron Massey Cup contracted, you would imagine, because he's not in the Eels top 30. He's not on full-time training, so he's a part-time footballer. But he's made a real fist of New South Wales Cup this year. Yes. And then you've got Will Latu, who I thought had a really good pre-season. I thought he would be, even an outside chance of maybe getting an NRL debut late in the season. And he's coming off the interchange in New South Wales Cup simply because of the players that have been called in. So maybe we're looking at the team, maybe we're a little bit light in the backs, only from the perspective that we've got backs that are out at the moment. But you'd still say, we've got players that are missing in the forwards. However, that it's still a relatively strong New South Wales Cup team for the Eels. They should get the job done, but I think it'll be closer than what people think.
Yep.
So, and like the Jersey Flegg, I'd like to see them get some of those fundamentals right, but more than anything else, that defence just has to be so much better than what we saw last week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
24 points in a 10, 11-minute window is outrageously bad. And you're going to struggle to win any game when you're conceding points like that in such a glut in such a small window. So no doubt Nathan Chaos would have drilled them on that this week, 60s, and they get some senior players back to help shore up those defensive line, or that defensive line. But yeah, equally so, look, Zach Hunter did a great job at fullback. He actually had a really nice game for the Eels, and he wasn't the reason they lost, but it just speaks to how good that Joash Papali has been this season, that you sort of see him come back in, you go, well, all right, I feel like we can take anyone. And he has been electric at the back and done plenty of hard work, but it's his finesse and acceleration that really stand out. So really excited to see Joash in action. And this is a game you can actually watch because it's not going to clash. I mean, most people will be working, and it's going to be a bit awkward. But if you've got a cheeky little tablet you can put on the side, or a window on your laptop or desktop at work that you can put the stream on, a little bit of a good afternoon fodder.
Yeah, absolutely. But, John, more than anything, look at the pack. Look at the first grade experience in that Eels pack. You'd have to say...
I mean, everyone's graded, right? Greg, Hands, Madison, Geimer, Cartwright, Gear. Yeah.
Yep. So you'd like to think they'll set the platform. Good spine off that. They should create opportunities. Let's hope that it's just we see the attitude is the right attitude this week, because I wasn't sure that it was last week. And I think it really had to do with the fact that, they knew that there were blokes that weren't playing, that could be playing. It's a long road trip out there to Tamworth, and I'm assuming they were on the road rather than flying regional. I could be wrong. But anyway,
the safe bet was a bus, right? Like taking the carriage rather than flying. And just a number of factors last week doesn't excuse that poor defensive effort, but it does explain some of the issues they had. And hopefully, with the players we see coming back into the team and the chance to turn it around this week, they'll be fired up for the big result and get their sort of, not saying season back on track is such an overreaction, but get back to vying for the top of the ladder, 60s.
Yep. And now that brings us to the main event, the Eels versus the Knights in NRL 6 p.m. kickoff.
Yes, the game that you almost always used to dread, because Newcastle always pulled out the plucky result for the longest time against the Eels, no matter how good or bad both teams were. Feels like in more recent seasons the Eels have managed to stabilise some of that, but no doubt that the Novocastrians have plenty of talent in this team, even if they're struggling like the Blue and Gold. Both teams coming into this one needing a win. So we'll run it through the Novocastrian lineup first. They've got the home field advantage here, 6 o'clock p.m. kickoff out of McDonald Jones Stadium on that Friday pub slot allocation. And they look like this. At fullback, it's Callum Ponga, who I believe is also their captain. They've got James Schiller and Dane Gagai on one side, Bradman Best and Fletcher Hunt on the other. Another Fletcher's in the team, but the more familiar one there of the sharp variety. He's in the number 6, partnering Jack Cogger in the 7. So big note there, 60s, no Greg Marju. He got hurt, did his knee late last week. So Greg he's a fascinating player, isn't he? Because he has such strengths, but also clear weaknesses at times. But I tell you what, I do count ourselves fortunate for him not being there. He's the sort of player, if he's leg drive and post-contact ability, that drives the Eels wild. So he is out. Moving into the front row, you've got Jacob Saifidi, Phoenix Crossland, and Tyson Frizzell moving into the front row this week. I don't know if that's been a seasonal thing for him, but more familiar in the back row. Tyson showing in his more advanced age as a rugby league player the ability to push into the middle. Dylan Lucas, Kai Pierce-Paul, and Adam Elliott, the starting back row there. Jaden Bailey, Matt Croker, who I believe just re-signed. Thomas Kant and Brody Jones round out the rotation, the interchange. That's the word I'm getting for. Having a little brain fade there. Extended roster, Jack Hetherington, who we didn't see in the New South Wales Cup. Tyson Gamble, Matthew Arthur, Kyle McCarthy, and Paul Bryan. That's their 22. Todd Smith is the official. I didn't get to see the officials on Tuesday, mate. So Todd Smith, the man with the keen eye for the water bottles. Business if anyone tries any shenanigans. Yeah, well, it was my mate a long time ago. Unfortunately,
you handed in your presidency of
the system's
his fan club.
The system's got to him, mate, and he's just another ref now. You got White Raymond and Dave Munro on the sidelines. Casey Badger in the box. Oof. All right, well, just don't let the bunker get involved, lads and ladies. But that is the Novocastrian 60s, and then for the Eels, we got a lot happening in this team list. There's not that many changes, but the ones that are seismic. Isaiah Yongi is our fullback. That's to be expected. Zach Lomax back and on that right wing where he'll partner Will Penasini, Sean Russell and the Fox, Josh Adokar in the 4 and 5 respectively. Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses, the Eels front line playmaking combination there in the 6 and 7. Jack Williams, Riley Smith and Junior Barlaw are the front row. Matt Dury on that right edge with Gideon Katonga down the left, Jermaine Hopgood at lock forward. Then the interchange, Dylan Walker, Luca Moretti, Jordan Samrani, who continues to develop as that back row utility there, alongside a rookie, big Toni Mataele, or should I say big, tiny Toni Mataele. Tony, of course, just being too good a moniker to miss there. Long time coming for the young man. He's put in the hard yards, finally gets the call. And fittingly, it's against the team that he actually left the Eels for in Newcastle before coming back to the club. And look, I'm not expecting him to come out and run for 200 metres and dominate 60s, but I am excited to see Tony getting his just desserts here. Like I said, he's put in the hard yards. It's been a couple of years in Reggie's here for the Eels where he's applied himself, had some bad luck with some soft tissue injuries. I think he had hammies and calves last year that sort of derailed his momentum. Stayed healthy this year and has put in the numbers, and he's averaging over 100 metres a game. Good defensive efficiency too. I think his effective tackle rate's 93.5% or something like that in New South Wales Cup. So he's hitting those KPIs that the coaches look for, and he's gotten the call up as a result.
Yeah, you know how happy we are to see Tony make his debut. It's when you follow the journey of junior rep players that make it all the way to the NRL, you almost feel the sense of pride that the family feels in them, because John, you and I invest a lot of our time in following.
Some might say inordinate amount of time. Yeah,
documenting their journey, and fortunately, I was able to spend a little bit of time today chatting with Tony and his family, who were there for the jersey presentation today. And obviously it's a proud time for them. And, I did say that, how much, how proud we were also of Tony, and because of the long journey to first grade and the hard yards that have been done along the way. And, it's been reward for effort and that willingness to learn under Jason Ryles as well. So really pleased for Tony to finally make that debut. John, Momax.
Yes, unbelievably, the first dose of Momax of Mitchell Moses and Zach Lomax, that is wild. It is round 11. We are nearly 3 months into the season 60s, and that is how much fate and Lady Luck has conspired against the Blue and Gold this year, that we've had Moses out for a long time with that stress fracture, or not stress fracture, the screw in his leg or foot rather, didn't take properly and had that late scratching at the end of the preseason. And then Zach kicks a game-winning field goal on a broken foot, on the broken plant foot, and he's out for 4 or 5 weeks. Just that is the most Parramatta thing possible, that you have this incredible pair of players that you're looking to put together and turn into this powerhouse combination down one side of the field, and then you don't see him for 3 months of the season consecutively.
And then once we see them this week,
there's a good chance they're
separated by Origin next week.
Either they're separated or we lose both of them.
Yes.
It's just, oh my God. Who'd be like...
Well, we know that Mitch Moses will be selected at 5'8" this week. We don't know... What we don't know is what's going to happen with Zach Lomax. You'd think that it might be a bridge too far to just come back with one game and be selected.
Maybe if Michael Maguire was still the coach, you'd have that edge of incumbency there and having put in the hard yards for that series win. But Laurie Dale is his own man, right? And he's going to have his own preconceptions, and he's had plays. He would be still... How long ago was Laurie? 2014, he won with Jared. But he coached a couple of years after that. So he'd be, sort of NRL adjacent with his the betting gig that he had, and he'd be absolutely coming with his own preconceptions and perceptions about who he wants to pick. And unfortunately for Zach, there's a lot of star power in that New South Wales backline that were looking on from the outside in last year in Latrell Mitchell and Tom Tebojevic. And there's been a push for guys like Jacob Kiraz as well more recently. And I mean, I like Kiraz. He's a very tough, rugged winger. But there's a lot of bodies and only 4 spots amongst the centres and wing positions for him to be able to get into.
Yeah, John, I want to start off with asking you this question. The Knights roster.
Yep.
Are they underperforming as a roster? And then you're looking at, well, what's the coach doing with them? Or are they performing as expected with the roster that they've got? Because, I think if you have a look at some of the players that are there, I mean, myself, I think they should be performing a bit better than what we've seen from them. But maybe you've got a different take on that.
That is such a fascinating question because I look at that Newcastle roster and I don't know. I know it sounds like fence sitting, but I don't know what the right answer is there because, yeah, you look at players like Kalen Ponga. I know that Fletcher Sharp's got a bit of hype, but they've got Gagai as a very experienced centre there and Bradman Best as the young buck in the centres. But I look at that roster and a lot of it doesn't wow me. And I know people might say the same about Parramatta without our perspective if they're looking at it as a neutral. But I do feel that the roster is not a great roster, but maybe by the same token or a different token, it is still underperforming, which is what's probably got the coach in a bit of trouble. It feels like he's been in the hot seat for year on year on end. And I don't know. I look at that and I don't see a team that's near contending, but also I do see a team that maybe should be better than it is. And it's not just about being better. The Newcastle Knights are incredibly inconsistent. They're incredibly streaky. And we see them go on runs. And in years gone by, they've managed to time that run for the finals. And obviously you want to be peaking at that end of the year, but it's not a consistent formula for success, or at least for prolonged success that encourages your players to be the best versions of themselves, where you go loss, win, loss through the season, and suddenly you get hot at the end of the year, or you rely on getting hot at the end of the year. So yeah, I think that if I had to pick one side of it, I would say that they're underperformers, but I also don't think that it's a roster that's been put together with a great deal of conviction and vision.
Yeah, John, that's the reason that I asked that question. Is I'm a bit betwixt and between with my assessment of them, because you look at it and you go, look, Kalen Ponga should be superstar.
Should be. I mean, and I know he still is a great player, but it feels like you're seeing the second, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, purely as a footballer, the second coming of Jared Hayne, where perhaps the most individually talented player in the code at his time, but he's not reaching the zenith of his abilities because some combination of his own input, but also the club not giving him the best environment to thrive in.
Yeah. So I look at this and I go, Ponga, Gagai, Best, at their best, Origin stars.
Yep.
Then I look at the halves and I go, well, Fletcher Sharp potentially playing out of position very fast. You can't give him any space because his pace will take advantage of that. But,
he can't be playing the halves next year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
A Brown-Sharp combination is just crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Then you look at the forwards and you go, okay, well, Saifidi and Frizzell have been Origin. Crossland played for New Zealand last year. Dylan Lucas is a major player of the future. A lot of raps on Kai Pearce-Paul, and maybe some players be interested in him being available on the market. Adam Elliott's been a first grader for some time at different clubs. Maybe the bench is a bit light on. Brayley certainly is a great player to bring on a dummy half in swapping positions around with Crossland, but yeah, it's a mix of players who on their day can win the game. So that like you'd say, they're strike players. They've got a host of strike players, and it's like whether it's been the players that are instrumental in getting them in position haven't, like the spine haven't clicked, or or whether the coach hasn't been able to extract the best out of them, or whether some of these players have seen better days or are overrated. I don't know what the answer is, but the answer is probably their position on the table and record.
Yeah.
When all's said and done. Now, we look at our own team and we want to put that focus there. And we know that it's been a case of so near and yet so far in matches. Last week, John, was the hardest instant reaction in some time for me. And, it was actually right up there with a couple of those big losses, like the loss to the Storm and the loss to the Raiders, in a different way, but it was still there. Like it was that pain of a match that should have been taken. Like we had those two big losses. It was like the horrific display made it painful. This one, it was like the key errors at the wrong time and just feeling so flat about a chance that was allowed to escape. Whereas we were fired up the week before about probably chances that were taken away from us, or a game that was taken away. This one, it was one where we've basically said, well, the players need to look in the mirror for why those opportunities disappeared, because they were key errors at the worst possible times. And, a game that was there for the taking and wasn't taken. And then I guess worst of all, we let a couple of key players, certainly one of them we let influence the game in Charlie Farnworth. Like he's just like he's probably the premier centre in the game in World Rugby League, and we knew he was going to be a threat, and he ended up pulling out like the big play when we least wanted it. And then of course, unfortunately, when you got someone like the Hammer, you have to ice every opportunity that you get in attack, because you're not going to necessarily score any long-range tries against him, because when he's beaten, he's still not beaten. If he's on his feet, unless you've left him on the ground and going past him, he's going to turn around and run you back down again. So, and that's exactly what happened. So, John, I look at this week and I go, let's not play so lateral this week. Let's play at least to like earn the right to spread the ball, to spread the play. And apart from that, can we make use of Zach Lomax in the air a little bit? A little bit. I mean, I don't want us just to rely on it, but can we just make a little bit of better use of it? Because there's probably been opportunities where we could have mixed the kicking up and, thrown in a grubber kick here or there in games, but we have not mastered that art of scoring tries from that ball in the air. And for all these years, we've had the tallest man in the world in Sean Lane and haven't been able to, unleash him as an attacking threat under a high ball. We've now got the man with probably one of the best leaps in rugby league to get up there and compete for the ball and have it and have that powerful athletic body to be able to dominate an opposite in competing for the ball. And yes, we've been without him for a period of time, but without Moses there, we weren't executing that kicking game at all with him. So I'd like to see, at least getting him involved in that in some way. So, John, how do you see this match playing out?
Yeah, look, Newcastle, a difficult team to get a beat on. We spoke about the issues with the coach and sort of that streakiness that they have under O'Brien. But that means that they've been in a downturn right now, and it's just as likely that they switch it around against us. They've got some big outs there. We mentioned Greg Marju. I didn't mention Leo Thompson. That is a big out in the middles there, which gives the Eels a bit more traction in the ruck. But Saifidi and Frizzell are very grizzled customers, and they're going to ask some questions of Parramatta's ruck, no doubt. I have no doubt, 60s, that the Eels have the talent to blow Newcastle off the park. You look at the individual sum parts of what we can do, and you look at the efforts against Cronulla, even Redcliffe, where we were too lateral, but still, even being too sideways, we were incredibly potent in offense. Just couldn't finish tries. Then you look at our best efforts earlier in the season. Obviously, the big win that we had. God, now it's all blurring together. With the big win over the Tigers, the great win against the Dragons, and then just the competitive bits against Manly, against the Bulldogs, less so the Raiders and the Storm. But you take those sum parts together, and there is no doubt that we can beat the Knights, and we can beat them very well. But we haven't shown the ability to put it all together. And both teams come into this game desperate for the win. I've been reticent to call it a spoon bowl or a early spoon sort of a prelude to what we see later in the year. But the reality is that these are two legitimate last place contenders right now. And the Eels, they can't afford. It's like there's 4 or 5 things that you sort of want to do in a game to make sure you win. We've spoken about it before. Get your possessions there, get your kicks right, get your defense right, and a couple other more nuanced things from there. It feels like the Eels are on top of like 1 or 2 or 3 things maybe at a time, but never the 4 or 5. And it's always something that's the thread that comes apart, gets unraveled and pulled apart by the opposition or themselves. Because more than perhaps anything, barring the Canberra game and the Melbourne game, the Eels have been their own worst opposition. They're the ones that have squandered wins against the Dolphins, against the Tigers the first time around, against the Bulldogs, and Manly too. They were all winnable games. So it just depends on how much the coaching staff can get it into the boys this week. I'm hoping that they come out fired up. I don't think strategically much is going to change. Obviously, Zach Lomax being there is going to help a lot, although it sucks that it came at the expense of Bailey Simonson, who's been tremendous this year since he came back. Just another, we talk about those luckless snake-bitten players. To get a bad break in your foot like that, coming back from an ACL reconstruction is just... But, I want to see more from Mitchell Moses, 60s. I thought he was a little reserved last week. Didn't play bad, just a little bit reserved. I think that Lomax being there should be the catalyst to really put him into the box seat to control this game. Likewise for Dylan Brown, this is a big game, mate. He's going up against his future employers, and he wants to make an impression, I reckon. And I know that Dill can be accused of being very blasé or sort of a cool customer, right? And not perhaps project the emotions or the platitudes and rugby league buzzwords that people want to see about being focused and driven and whatnot. But I think in the back of his mind, this is a big one for him, and I hope that he stands up and delivers. Beyond that, the middles have to be good. They haven't been consistent enough this year, 60s, and even in the games where they've been good, there's always been a lapse. Against the Bulldogs, they really were gritty for 65, 70 minutes of that game, but they gave up a couple of soft tries. They're the moments that kill you. We talk about those threads that unravel and sort of pull you apart at the seam. Those are those threads right there. So I look at that. I'm expecting big games from the halves. Surely Azari Yongi has a bounce back game too. He'll be killing himself with the error. There was a couple of errors. There was one on the high ball too, but the one where the biggest gimme try he's ever going to have, and he butchered it with the line, literally begging him to fall over and put the ball down. Zach Lomax is back. The Fox is in career best form right now. Like there are a lot of reasons to think the Eels can do this. Dylan Walker, Luca Moretti, Jordan Samrani. That bench is great. And Jordan Samrani is playing as a bench forward that's really the primary edge right now. He played 71 minutes last week. And I know that part of that was enforced by HIA and then injury to Bailey, but he's got the motor to do it. He's been an 80-minute back, and he's transitioning to that edge role really nicely. So there are so many different ways the Eels can attack the Knights, and I know I've waffled on here, mate, but like you look at it, and Iongi, Lomax, Penasini, Addo Carr, the two halves in Brown and Moses, Junior Barlow's offloading and running game, Riley Smith's energy, Gideon Katonga's offloading. We saw a hint of that last week against the Dolphins with that incredible try assist he laid on. Dylan Walker's been one of the best lock forwards in the game this year. Luca Moretti is one of the best impact players off the bench this year. You know, there are so many ways the Eels should be able to win this game. But the problem is, can they minimise the stuff where they're going to trip themselves over? And they haven't been able to do it this year. So that's going to be, that's my question for the Eels.
Yeah, and you throw in, I think we've got a milestone game from Sean Russell this week. There was a presentation at training. I'm assuming it might be game 50.
Sean, the club hasn't put it in their Team West post, but let me have a quick gander. It is. Where is his rugby league project page?
I'm thinking it's game 50 in his career.
Yeah, so 49 appearances. So you're right, 60s, 50th.
Yeah,
the half ton.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. So he's got a milestone game. You've got Toni Mataele making his debut. So you've got the little motivators there as well for players who not just winning because the team needs a win or because they need to perform at their best, but you've also got a couple of milestone games, a couple of achievement games for players, which is also nice to get the win for them. John, that you mentioned Mitch Moses not being at his best last week. I really put that down to the fact that there was no platform that was laid.
Yeah, and it's easy to sort of then parcel the blame onto the half, saying you need to take control, you need to be able to play direct against the opposition that aren't being pushed back by the middles. But the reality is that while Moses is capable of doing that, even great halves like Johns and Thurston, you can't do it consistently. And he's done it in the past, and you can't expect that from him every week. And that's not to say he still couldn't have done more. But yeah, the Eels were definitely victims of, at least in that second half, up until the last 10 minutes, not being able to get a foothold in the ruck. And then suddenly the Dolphins just faded, and the Eels were the fitted team coming home with a wet sail, but couldn't turn those line breaks into points consistently. So yeah, maybe that's an indication that our fitness levels are actually starting to look pretty good mid-season, but also that there's a lot of work to do in the middle, mate. So you look at that saying we finished against the Dolphins with a wet sail, but we also got beaten through the middle pretty bad. So good and bad there, and it means that the guys have to step up this week through the middle. As you said, 60s, you can't expect Mitchell Moses to dominate and orchestrate a huge win or any win if his middles aren't laying a platform. And when the opposition tees off on you defensively like the Dolphins did, that it's not just Mitchell Moses that needs to call the audible there and find a way to punish the aggressive defense, whether it's by a shift early in your red zone or running in pods and be able to do a bit of ball playing at the line for your middles. But the Eels, they can't allow themselves to get beat up on like that by any team, but let alone the Dolphins and the Knights. If it's the Melbourne Storm, inflicting some pain and panic in defense on you, it's like, okay, it sucks, but it's Melbourne. You can't let the Dolphins and the Knights this week dictate terms to you like that in defense. So I'm expecting the boys to be better there, but that means Williams, Barlow, Dury, if he ends up going back to that middle rotation, Hopgood, Walker, Moretti, Mataele. Need big games from them individually and as a pack, because you can't just turn the Mitch and say, okay, we're on our 20-metre line, kick it 60 metres downfield, make something happen.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so we're at the point where it's time for the predictions. I'll let you lead off first, mate.
Yeah, I can't talk about how many different ways the Eels can attack the Knights and how many key plays there could be with the caveat of that thread that can trip you over, but without backing it up with a bold call. So big win for the Eels this week, 60s, 42-16. I'd like to say less points conceded, but I think the Knights going to get a few tries. First try scorer, it's cliche if I go Zach Lomax, so I'll let someone else tip Zach Lomax, whether it's you or another podcast. I will go forward's going to dominate, Jack Williams. So little crash ball off maybe Riley Smith or running an inside line off Dylan Walker if he gets some early interchange maybe. And then best on field, again, Mitchell Moses, the easy one, Zach Lomax, an obvious one. But I set the narrative up, mate, up against his future employer, Dylan Brown, for a big game.
Sounds good, mate. So I'm not as bullish about a big win. I think the Eels will just edge out the Knights in this one. I think score 26-22, something like that. I think maybe we're going to see the best game this season from one of the forwards. Let's go for on the back of what he did last week in just a flash moment. But let's go for Gideon Katonga to have a breakout game in this one. And I'll double down and say him for first try scorer as well.
Nice.
So, yeah, a little bit of confidence from that ball that he put on last week. And for those people who've been wondering about why he's, a lot of people weren't convinced about him and his selection in first grade. That was just this little bit of evidence of what the coaches see in him. And we know that there's a lot that Gideon's still got to learn. Like in the first half, he should have given that ball to Josh Addo-Carr, where there was just, he had the time to pass. Addo-Carr had the space in front of him. Maybe might have been too much to expect him to get past the hammer, but he was on his way down to the red zone, at least at a time where we needed him to be down there. And that was the easy pass. And then he's come up with the incredible backhand offload to Iongi to put him into space. So maybe, as I said, on the back of that confidence from that play, best on field, first try scorer double. So we'll see how we go. Okay, John, well, that just about wraps things up. Our thanks to all of our viewers / listeners. Remember, whatever platform that you're watching or listening this on, if you can give it a like or subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. Also, a shout out to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and of course, Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels. We'll be there next Friday, for the game against Manly. So, and that's, I think, that's an 8 o'clock kickoff.
Sure, that's a prime time kickoff. Let me just confirm that for you.
Has to be the prime time kickoff.
It is prime time, yeah.
We're yet to confirm the time that we'll go with the podcast, but in all likelihood, I would imagine it'd be a similar time to the previous week. Might be looking around the 5:30 live appearance in Sterlo's there. We don't know who the guest will be, but we'll cover that next week. And John, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.
Well said.